So hello everybody, we're trying out some new tech. So sorry we're a little bit late. Are you all ready now?
Yeah.
And so we have a whole bunch of people around the room here. I can actually see you online now though, because I've got a big TV, so my eyesight can even fit you all in. Hi. Otherwise you were just these vague blurs in the background. So we're just going to start with a little alignment, and then we're going to have a little discussion about how the process of our group work is. So just drop in for a moment, find your center. And activate your threefold chakra, crown, heart, base, this threefold system. Each one a doorway into the dark. And then see if you can lift up into the causal field, just going up through the crown center. Taking your seat in the lotus. And feeling the group field, the radiation of the group field. Sounding the note of your soul and feeling it overlap with all of these other souls. And see if you can find that point of diamond clarity at the core of the group soul. And send up that plasma beam, that electric blue light. And visualize it going up into a black hole. And letting any energy that wants to move from your body, through your emotions, through your mind, to run up that beam. And then let's just spend a couple of minutes in the void together. Just allow your awareness to drop into emptiness. And then feel that beam activating again in the reverse direction. So pouring in the lightning, stimulating the jewel, electrifying the soul field. And then grounding or earthing back into this triplicity of crown and heart and base. Let's bring the sword in. Okay, thank you. So the transmission today focused on the formation of the group chakra, the group ashramic life. So I thought I'd like to start by just getting some feedback. How is it going for you? Have you been doing the altar and med, and if so, what happened? And so we can start to like calibrate our instrument and understand the effects of this energy on us. So yeah, open to just share any insights or experience that you have had.
Hi. So yesterday we did a ritual with Katya and Maya of offering our worst and best parts.
Can't hear anything, so hold on, Igor. I can see your mouth working, but
Can you hear me? Anybody?
Pause on the and stop
No?
flashing.
Yes?
I can turn it up, but the Wi-Fi signal's flashing.
Okay, so let's just turn it off. Let's drop it.
Yeah, it's off.
And now it's supposed to work right now from this speaker, so someone can speak.
okay, try again, Igor, and we'll see if we can hear you now.
Hey, can you hear me?
No, I cannot hear him.
I'm speaking.
I think we're cut
Nope,
off from
we have-
Highden.
Sorry.
Okay, try again.
1, 2, 3. It's
Yeah,
working?
we got you.
Okay, cool. So in general, it was working way beyond any expectations. And yesterday we did a ritual with Katya and Maya of offering our worst and best to the altar. And so my experience, basically, when we first did the worst and then the best, and they said the exact same thing. I experienced them as exactly the same energy. I was reading a lot about the wheel that separates itself in two parts, and one stays here and one goes down. And I had an experience of that. Like they said exactly the same words with exactly the same power, and the suffering that I experienced like all my life is just, I was kind of rejecting these identities, the bigger one and the smaller one, and I'm kind of still processing that, and yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. And maybe just something about that is the difference between consciousness and life. So in the Bible is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. And basically, whenever we put ourselves as consciousness between heaven and earth or spirit and matter, we choose to use our consciousness to discriminate. And so your best and worst is just your decision about what's best and worst. And the life principle doesn't make that distinction. So what life is energy. And when we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we choose how to use that life and whether it's good or bad. But if you stop choosing and just experience life, then that duality collapses. So, what you experience is a beautiful reference point for the deeper truth, which is it's just energy. Okay, any other input or experience? That includes you guys, if you've been, focused in this direction.
Yeah, I could say one of the things that I've been experiencing is a removal. Like, it's almost like I'm watching from above. So it's not that I'm not having my emotional process or going through it, but it's like I'm watching it instead of being it. And sometimes it helps me run through it, and sometimes it's just watching it and watching it run. Mm-hmm. But it's like watching it, and it's like, oh, that's quaint, kind of from a.
So you're getting a bit more impersonality on your process.
On my process, yeah. It's like, I'm still doing the things I do, but I'm not as engaged in it.
Mm. I'm also interested in, this experience of offering up your best and your worst on the altar and allowing the energy to shake out and move so that the energy moves. So wondering if anyone's had any experience of that and, what your process was.
Yeah, I'm actually finding, Bruce, the offering to the altar super powerful, almost more powerful so far than the meditation practice for me, in the sense that it is developing this deep sense of faith and surrender that I haven't experienced to this degree, in the sense of I'm actually sacrificing my best and my worst, and both it is bringing that impersonality that Lisa has mentioned, but it's also bringing that I'm actually trusting that I don't need to do anything about it beyond that, and that it is going where it needs to go, and it is doing what it needs to do. And then as a result, I'm just feeling like on a very visceral level, I wouldn't even say just energetic, on a very visceral level of sense of expansion inside of me and a sense of aliveness. And I feel like a lot of my eros got like super, super strong as a result of it, for instance. So it's like I'm feeling the energy run a lot more cleanly.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to share an experience on Monday that, we did the offering ritual, and when I put my best and worst on the altar, I felt this incredible sadness, actually like this deep sadness, and I started crying like uncontrollably. And it was like when I dropped in that space that was behind the sadness, like this deep silence came and this really big spaciousness was there, but it was like shedding this identity and the sadness around that, of holding on to it and then letting go and letting the tears and the sadness be there, and then kind of just going to this place behind all of that. I wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, a few bits and pieces coming in, and I want to say kind of like the warning on the label, I suppose, as I see there's maybe 30 people online and the same in this room, and a lot of us are curious about this process, and many of us are deeply into the life principle. But I would say that this is not kind of just another self-development technique. If we are working with shambolic energy, which is, if we are being supported by these energies and forces, it's going to have profound effect. And in a way, it's kind of a it's a hidden secret, I think, because it's important not to speak about contacts with other worlds from a way that just produces glamour in people's lives and curiosity. But at the same time, you actually have to own where things are coming from. And I know in my life, having worked in this energy for 20 years, while I would love to think, and many people think it's because I'm incredibly charismatic and intelligent, and I do what I do because of my inherent capacities, I know what a hopeless loser I actually am, and how much my life's been accelerated by in contact with energies that are not in the normal human domain. So I want to say that if you genuinely apply the practices, and you genuinely surrender into the energy that is available, things get very deeply accelerated, which means that, for many people, they may not be here in a month's time or a year's time, and other people may, and some people may accelerate and radically change beyond measure. So I just want to let you know that to deeply play with these energies, you're playing with something that's quite outside our normal access. And my own experience is when I do this particular practice or put the best and worst on the altar, I actually have radical kriyas or shaking in my body as, energy has been shaken somewhere and rushing up this column. And so it's a kind of a totally new way of doing your psycho-spiritual process. Because normally our psycho-spiritual process is done because we have a self that is labeling this emotional energy as good or bad, this wounding from my parents, this, so we're intervening in our own psycho-spiritual process with our own ideas of good and bad, and our own ideas of what healing is and what growth is and what we should be and our ideals and all of those things. So all of that work has its place, but it's not the life principle. The life principle just is impersonal in that sense. It doesn't, he's given us this thing in the transmission of what does it look like when you're forming an ashram from the subtle worlds. And he says it looks like bubbles forming on the surface of a supersaturated solution, or a hot chemical solution, or lotuses on a pond. That from the perspective of the subtle worlds, there's no seeing of anyone as a personal being. They're just seeing the soul. It's the soul that's responsible for your whole personal experience. So these energies are impersonal, not because they don't care about your personal self or that they're not grounded in matter or any of those things. They're just impersonal because they're operating through the jewel and through the lotus. And it's assumed that each person is going to do their personal work. So it's kind of like an acceleration process that has got nothing to do with your own psycho-spiritual development as body-mind. It's got to do with you as an energy unit in a far vaster energy. And the only thing that's really interesting to that energy is what is the quality of your energy, what is the capacity to run current, and what are the blocks in that energy flow. So none of that translates into a mother complex or even an archetypal animus, or none of that. That's all our human interpretation of it. So just understanding that means that you can attempt to bypass some of that process, particularly with the stuff that we've worked on for years and it's never changed. That stuff, we all have it, and we all are chewing away at it, one bite at a time. And what he's saying is that this energy doesn't really care about our shame about that, or our guilt about it, or our issues about it. It's just fuel. And so if you're willing to stop judging good and bad and everything else, and give the core energy that is too powerful for your soul to transform, then that energy can be used for life. So yeah, that's just to recognize recognition that it's a totally different way of working than what we're used to. And while things do have to flow through consciousness, they flow through the soul, you don't really want to be paying too much interest in them. So in other words, there's a technique that he calls particularly for working with Maya, which is basically energy that is down in your physical and etheric body beneath consciousness. And the technique is indifference. Allow the energy to move, but be indifferent to it. Because if you try to unpack it psychologically and open it out and deal with it, and then it's going to cause much more problems than if you just let it pass through the core of the soul. If you just let your consciousness let it pass through without judging it, without interpreting it, without making a story about it, just move the energy. So we kind of know this from it's the kind of work when we're working with the emotional body. Run the energy and don't worry about the story. Well, this is kind of the spiritual equivalent. Run the energy that's locked deep in the atoms and matter of your body, and in your unconscious. Let that energy run through the soul, be drawn up by the life principle. And the same when the energy comes back the other way, just allow it to drop in and pour through. So the transmission was basically saying, okay, from the perspective of hierarchy or the subtle planes, what their experiment is harvesting willing human souls and building them in an Aquarian type model into the group chakras of the planetary life. So that's what's going on from the subtle worlds. And he used the analogy of like going, someone making an instrument, maybe a flute. They go to the forest and they talk to the tree and they say, do you want to be part of my flute? And then they harvest the material. So what we are doing is we're like willing cells in that harvesting process, saying we want to be built into an instrument for making the music of life. And so because we're being harvested, he says the processes are, first of all, the substance needs to be gathered, and then it needs to be worked, just like you would work the wood or the skin of your drum or something to make an instrument. And it needs to be organized. So some cells go with some cells, and then it needs to be tuned so that the instrument can make music, and then you can play. And so the whole idea of this experiment, and this will go on in the Aquarian age, is the experiment of helping humans come together, not through their own will and their own common vision, or let's create us do this or do that, but to come together and surrender to the mystery and let the mystery accelerate and guide us and show us by using us in a much higher energy process than we could come up with ourselves. So that's the surrender process. And he's giving us very clear, stages that we go through in that process of being, giving your consent, saying yes. And then the next is a process of being worked. And part of this meditation he's giving us is to say, okay, I'm willing to be worked. Here's my best and worst, the two ends of my spectrum. Here's my crown and my base and my heart. I'm putting it on the altar. Like, work this. And work it much more effectively than I can work it with my idea of psychological health and everything else. Work this so that I'm a fitting cell to be used in this greater instrument. And he's saying in that process of transmission, it's good to have a distinction between our personal self, the part of us that's being calibrated so we're a better instrument, and what's coming through us for the group. So I don't know if anyone's tried yet the recording in their journals and like taking time asking that question of what's the most important thing that I need to know right now in my life. I don't know if anyone's tried that. Have you? Great. But what he was saying in the transmission is there is a noticeable shift in the group life, that from the inner worlds now there are a number of leaders coming up. And remember, a leader is that plasma that anything sends up when it wants to be hit by lightning, when it wants to receive energy from the subtle worlds. So he's saying that there is much more verticality in the plasma demand of the group. and that is a positive sign. And of course, when you send up that leader, you're basically wanting to come, we're wanting to come under group impression, because so much more can come through when a group is calibrated than can come through an individual. And so this is the part of the coming process. So he's saying that when you do put up your leader, there's going to be a time of calibrating your equipment. So he suggests the first thing is you ask for what you need to know personally that will help you get out of the way more and make your individuality more able to be worked into the group life. Okay, so, and he said, and he recommends that whatever comes through at that time, that first time, is that you keep personal. And the reason for keeping it personal is twofold, in my view. One is that it stops you focusing on your personal self, what you're getting in your psychological process and so on. And the second thing is it stops you seeking validation from others. Because often what we get when we open up our inner worlds is that we're uncertain about what we're receiving, and we want confirmation from others. And we've all had the experience of like offering your gold to someone else from a deep journey, and their mind judges it, and then we wonder whether it was actually worth sharing or whether it was of any value. So he's saying, for your personal process, you will need to prove this to yourself, okay? Because even now you may have had amazing experiences. Like we all know in our own life, we have incredible synchronicities, miracles everywhere, but then we get up the next day and our judgment mind comes in and says, well, that could have all just been bullshit. So, and it's not until we're in that next stage of unfoldment that we realize, oh, actually, I'm really living my life from synchronicity and miracle now, and from some magic beyond my understanding, and I'm starting to expect that. So he says that your mind will need to prove to yourself that this is a valuable process. And the way to do that is to receive individual guidance through your plasma, reflect upon it, and act upon it until you have proven the value of it in your own life. Before you share that, that's your personal harvest from the ashram. And I found that in my own process a very important thing. I gave myself 6 months before I spoke to anyone about this process when I was first doing it. And it only took me like 1 month to realize, it was proved beyond my scientific demand. But the 6-month process was really good because it allowed me to not only feel its value in my own life, but start to see its value around me. And so I could actually track, where is the source of this change that's happening around me coming from? And that makes you much more aware of the subtle dimensions of what really changes things in the world. It's not so much all of the loud thunder and lightning, it's subtle energy which is working its way through that makes lasting change. So that's the first part of the process, is to, give yourself permission, not as a personal self wanting attention, but as a unique instrument in the group field that needs to be calibrated and has your own absolutely essential note that is going to sound in the music of the group chakra. So you want to have healthy divine pride, not the personal self wanting to be validated to make up for it, not feeling important, but the soul wanting to know, how do I sound my note most effectively so that the love that I am has influence and can support others, and how do I let life flow through me? So I've personally found that a quite shocking experience, because what I first expected was, like some things about how wonderful I was, and what I really got was that the shocks that showed me just, how manipulative and how, selfish and all of those things. So if I wanted to actually receive something good, that wasn't what I was looking for. However, it is a beautiful medicine, because if you know that you are totally seen, and we all get to manipulate each other, because we're all humans together and we're all at different levels of capacity. So we can play the game of manipulating each other so that you don't see my shadow. But if you really want to open yourself up to much deeper dimensions of consciousness, that sees right through you. The cosmic rays pass through everything. There's nothing hidden. And that can be incredibly scary, and it can be incredibly liberating. Because if you trust yourself enough to know that your best and worst can all be put on the altar, and all of the judgments and stuff swept away, and what remains is something that can be used because it's real. It's not, you're not in there protecting it and managing it. So the first part of it is that healthy sense of, okay, show me, you know, like shine through me and reveal the gift that I am, which is not going to be as great as I think in my best moments, and not going to be as terrible as I'm afraid of in my worst. But if you have any kind of inferiority superiority complex, and my view is everybody does, then put it on the altar and it will be reduced to ashes. And what will emerge out of it is you beginning to be able to be put in your place. Okay, because you can't be put in your place as long as you're still trying to earn your place or validate your place or convince other people that you have a place or any of that stuff. You can only be put in your place when you're an authentic human being, transparent before God and the goddess and the divine life, and then and with your consent saying, and now move me to where I'm the most effective and where I can give the most of the gifts that I've come to give. So that's the second stage, which is the beginning to be worked. And being worked, you know, requires your consent. And that consent is given over and over again by your attention every day or every week in a rhythm to say, okay, here I am again in front of the altar offering. You know, I've had some successes, so my best is growing, and I'm not in touch with my worst, so I'm giving them up. Or I'm lost in my worst. I'm just in my Eeyore, and I need to offer that. So that continual process of offering is part of being worked. And it's the opposite of what most people are doing, which is accumulating. They're accumulating more and more identity. They're accumulating more and more self-value. They're loving themselves more. They're doing all of that stuff, which is accumulation. And it's not being naked before the divine. And that nakedness is what's required for life to build you into, the global ashram. The other thing that he was saying in terms of that process of being built in is that, yes, some people suggested last week that, of course, we're not just talking to DK or whatever. That's just an individuality that, you know, helps us understand. We are dealing with planetary and cosmic energies, and that we all have our own ashramic affiliations anyway. You know, the soul is already aligned with a particular soul ashram and monadic ashram, and so a lot of awakening is remembering and opening those doors. And he says, yes, that's all true, and organizations like Shambhala School or Highden or the Mandalas will be like places that you can find your home, your subtle home through. But he's saying there's also another experiment here, that the jewel sounds the note of the monad. And he's saying the experiment is if groups can be created of incarnate humans that are not just aligned with their soul note, but they're aligned with the life principle, then that life principle, the Shambhala energy, the monadic energy, can consensually work through humans instead of just working through the soul. And that consensual is why the education about it is so important, and why we need to give our consent. Because when the personal self says, okay, I'm a yes to this life principle, then it results in acceleration. When the personal self doesn't say yes, the life principle operates anyway, but we don't get to feel like we gave our consent to it. We feel like it's happening to us in the world, and we're at the victim of that in some way. So I said part of actually allowing life principle to flow into humanity is to help build groups of people who are saying yes to that, who want to work with it, who understand it's going to accelerate their path, but they also understand that it's going to help them have more powerful influences. That energy is coming in anyway. So the second half of the receiving impression is letting go of the personal now. Like, how am I as a calibrated cell in this being? What do I need to do to be self-responsible and surrendered? Now, he said the way to do it is see that there is a being that is trying to reveal itself and incarnate something through the group. So after we all shine our note, and we're all working on that all of the time, now we need to be brought together into group relationship. And that being brought together into group relationship is not based on our ideas of how that should be, which is why governance and everything else doesn't work if it's based on an ideology or an idea. It's based on some intelligence that we don't know. So he said the way to think of it is a being is trying to incarnate through the group of people, and it's trying to reveal through what he calls the applied power of synchronicity. That's its power to reveal to you how you need to organize. And so it says that this is the part when you're receiving impression, then you may get a piece that links with someone else's piece. And that's part of the organizing principle. Okay, it's not to get together and say, wow, we got the same piece. It's like you are being organized through synchronicity and through the process of revelation. That is the power that is building the group chakra. And, you know, we get to experiment with that here, and I'm sure experimenting with it in Shambhala school, is that the magical process of finding resonance, and that resonance telling you, oh my God, I'm on the right track. And he talks about the ecstasy somewhere of being in the right place, doing the right thing with the right people. Like, there's a quality of ecstasy that your soul knows that you can't understand, but it tells you that that's you're being organized to your maximum capacity, given, you know, all of the variables. So he says that the applied power of synchronicity will help you find your relating with each other. And then he gives a couple of, like, you know, explanations about that. First, that when you are sharing, when we start to share with each other, share the essence. Don't share the story about how I got this and what it means to me. It's like, share the essence and look for where that resonates with someone else's essence. And then find what that means. Not a meaning for everyone, but a meaning between you. If you follow that meaning, it will help build a link. And if you keep building those links, you end up with a chakra. You end up with a group field. But it's built from those living links of synchronicity and revelation, because the instrument you are receives in a certain way, and it wants to call others who receive in similar ways to form structures in the same way that cells in the eye or cells in the heart start to organize because they know themselves through resonance. And then he's got a particular, kind of warning about this. He said that the energy that's used to build chakras and to build group soul is the erotic power of the soul. And so it carries potential energy. Okay, and that's when you start to feel charged with someone. You feel like there's a charge between us. It can be a positive charge or it can be a negative charge. But that charge is potential energy that is supposed to be used to generate the group chakra more powerfully. Okay, but if you misinterpret it, and everybody does, if you take that charge to be something personal between me and you go off with that to try to work it out, you end up in very intense interpersonal dynamics. And then after the intense interpersonal dynamics, you often damage the relating in a way that doesn't allow, and you use up the energy that was supposed to be for group chakra formation, and you drain it away into personal dynamics. So this sounds to me like a few 100-year process. Like it's not something that we're going to get, because we do it. Like I see it happening all of the time, because the erotic power of the soul is so powerful. It's so much deeper than our normal attractions and repulsions and so on. It's almost irresistible because it's carrying life force. And that irresistibility of it brings too much energy that the personal selves can't handle that energy. They can't process it all. And, and particularly in soul groups, people come together and they're like, oh my God, I've always wanted a relationship. And then they use the group power of the group eros to drag some, other group member off and try to set up house and have a relationship. And it often doesn't work because the energy is not a personal energy. It's not to say that personal relatings don't occur and that all of these dimensions are, but he's saying, be very careful that you can learn how to differentiate them, that you can differentiate. And that's why he's suggesting the first half of the meditation, apply it to your personal calibration of you as an instrument. The second part will start to bring in group eros, and that group soul eros is the source of the synchronicities and the revelations and the amazing charges that are starting to happen in the group life. But if you misinterpret that charge, if you too early take that into material expression without going to the Buddhic plane first, then you disconnect the process. So he's saying, be really interested in those charges, because those charges are the technology of group soul and ashram formation. But they are potent energies that need to operate at a subtle dimension. And he said one of the ways of doing that is work with the wisdom of, what is this charge about? Okay, don't assume it, don't just let it run in the normal channels. And we all know what the normal channels are. It's like, it's a sexual erotic connection, it's a relationship connection, it's a, here's my business card, and we'll create a program together. There's a so subtle reason for the charge. And if you go with deep inquiry into that and listen together to that, and get the deep soul thing sorted out first, then when it lands, when it drops into the three worlds, it's much more likely to accelerate the group life rather than to drain energy from it. So, like I said, I don't think we're going to get this one simply. I think it's going to be an ongoing work in progress, but I think we've had enough experiment in our group life to see it in action and to know what he's talking about. Like, we know when that energy drains from the group, and we know when it starts to fire the group process and stimulate more. So yeah, the formation of the group soul, and the group soul then forming a chakra, and that chakra being able to eventually transmit life. So if we go back to that analogy, first of all, we're being worked. So you take raw materials and you refine them. So a refined soul is basically what the alchemists used to do, or they take a lump of rock and they turn that into gold or a diamond. So there's the working of ourself so that we can become a living stone in the temple. And that's the mandala work, and it's group work, and it's the ongoing commitment we all have to refine ourselves. And that's accelerated by using the life principle, that the life principle will refine us much faster. And then the second thing is, how then, as a soul who is sounding a somewhat authentic note, how do we now be worked into the group field so that far greater energies can flow in? And as we're working with the world soul at the moment and it's trying to land, it's trying to have experimental processes that bring it through more powerfully, which is kind of what we're doing with the mandala work. So he say, pay attention to the technology of group formation and what will bring you into relationship with each other, and start to pay attention to the organs forming within the group life. So within, a whole ashram, there are 7 sub-ashrams. Within a center like Highden, there eventually will be 7 centers. Like, that's the way fractals work. So if you are aligning energetically with others, find where there is resonance, and also recognize that in the synthesis ashram, which is what this work is, you will have souls of all the rays, and maybe even monads of all of the rays. So it means you can't just hang out with your tribe, people who get each other and share the same sense of sacred, and like nothing needs to be said because they're all vibing together. You're going to be hanging out with people who vibe very differently. But the life principle can handle that. Consciousness can't. Consciousness wants to create a mission statement and get everyone to sign up for it and everyone to agree on the sacred values, but consciousness will never hold groups of a wide diversity of souls together. And that's what the ashrams are. They are the souls finding their soul mates in group formation and being chakras for the planet. But this experiment is to bring the life principle to the center, to have the dark light at the center of the chakra, not consciousness. And that is strong enough to hold many different souls in an experiment, many different varieties of soul sacredness. But it does require that you recognize that what's at the core is life, and that you are surrendered to that life, and you are letting life organize you, and it will organize you in a much different way than, say, just a 7th ray ashram or a 5th ray ashram. So what else is there to say? Oh yeah, he says that over time now, if you want to be in this experiment, you have to expect those things to be worked. Okay, and again, you can accelerate this or decelerate this. The more you meditate, the more you do your altar work, the more you offer up, the more you'll be worked. So there'll be cycles of being worked. And of course, those cycles of being worked will bring up psycho-spiritual material. What do you do with that? You set it up the plasma beam. You don't try to unpack it too much. Of course, things well up and we have to own them and share them and so on. But the emphasis in the life principle is on the life, not upon, a lot of consciousness about what's going on for us, and certainly not about being bogged down in our forms. So it's letting the spirit, which is at the core of matter and at the core of consciousness. So it's not consciousness over form or form over consciousness. It's the spirit, which is in both, at the core of both, running through our core, and we're throwing everything into it. So be expect to be worked and to have cycles of being worked. And when you're being worked, it's not much fun. Even though the energy may be running up, you're wrestling to have it not spill out into your process and activate all of your woundings and spend all of your time in your room wrestling with that. You're trying not to do that. However, sometimes it's overwhelming. So compassion, you're being worked. Maybe we should have a little hat that we wear. I'm being worked right now, like a mining hat or something. Men at work, like life principle at work, And so somehow, just accept this is the work. I'm in the work. I'm being worked. And then there'll be cycles of organization. And that's where that applied power of synchronicity comes up, where we're starting to be reorganized. And there's a soul law called the law of repulse. That we're starting to operate shamanically, not from our minds and not from, oh, I love you, I'll never, not be with you. It's like, today I love you, tomorrow shamanically I'm distant. And instead of something's wrong, let's together and work it out, you realize you're being organized. That you're being organized by a principle. Nothing's wrong. That the shamanic comings and goings of attraction and repulsion are part of the intelligence of something that is beyond your dear Cedric, spiritual psychology that feels like what should happen. And if you do that, then you solve a lot of interpersonal dynamics because, again, like you've got the men at work sign, you've got a I'm being organized sign, like don't take it personally. I'm just not hanging out with you for a while because every time I come near your aura, there's a repulse. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean that we need to sit and process about it. It's just we're being organized. It's okay. And next week, it may be different. So do we know this process? Particularly those in residential community do, right? It's a shamanic reality. And all of our problems are not because the shamanic reality happens, it's because we put meaning to it. And we give it meaning that actually spirals us into process. So first of all, I'm being worked. Secondly, I'm being organized. And that means I'm forming an organ. Today, I'm hanging out with this person, tomorrow that person. And we have to learn to be shamanically intelligent so that we are following those currents and those flows and those attractions and repulsions without needing to explain and work through with each person all of the time about what that means. Because none of that meaning really is relevant to the life principle. So somehow you've got to actually have a lot of capacity to back yourself, and you have to live in a culture where this is understood, because it isn't understood out there in the world. Like I know for me personally, my body responds quite strongly to the law of repulse. I just walk away. Like my horse just goes, and often people feel like you're being rude, but I'm not being rude. I'm just like, oops, my horse is off. Like I'm off to the next thing that I'm supposed to be called to. It's like maybe I didn't do the 3 niceties that I should have done on the way out, but it's just the way that it is. If you live in a culture like that where you all know what's going on, and then you're not reading into other people's actions, all of the stuff that's out there in society, all of the rituals and the social niceties which are designed to stop you killing each other, basically. All of those social niceties are like rituals we have because most people underneath that have such an intense selfishness that the rituals support relationship. But if you are with people who are surrendered to life, and you give them the benefit that they are following that life, not that they are personally insulting you by not talking to you, then you have a culture that supports that. And then the applied power of synchronicity, the miracles, the synchronicities of things beyond that we can know start to reveal themselves. And life principle, as well as the 7th ray, which receives that life principle, operates according to what we call magic. And I like what Carl Jung said about magic, which is that when you have done the best to control your own chariot, and you notice that a power greater than you seems to have taken over the reins, that's magic. And the thing I like about that is that, first of all, it's when you have done everything that you can do. So it's not about magic is just like being swept up by the universe. You have to apply effort. You have to do what you can do. And then when you do what you can do and you get into an alignment with these greater powers and energies, then you let them take over. Then magic is at work. And to the personal self, it's like, oh my God, miraculous things are happening. But to a higher order, it's just another universal energy that's at play. So giving yourself to that magic, giving other people's permission to give themselves to that magic, accelerates the formation of the group chakra. And then the last thing he said is that you don't just make an instrument and never play it until it's made. You have to play it on the way through to test it. Test its resonance, to see whether the strings are working, to see whether the skin of the drum is taut enough. So he's saying that you'll be tuned, you'll have periods of being worked, periods of being organized so that you're in the instrument in the right way, and then periods of being tuned and tested, which means the life principle begins to shine through. And as the result of that shining through, your system is modified and changed. So this is the reverse of like sending your best and worst up the plasma channel. This is energy coming back the other way. Again, it's impersonal. It's not trying to give anything to you, or it's trying to play music through you. And when music is played through you, it's like current through a wire. That current's going to bring up any impurities in the wire. It's going to show where the note is not the right note. And so then that process of like being in service and letting yourself be used as part of the group chakra is also another cycle that is, you know, to be expected. And then to also understand that these cycles rotate. 1 minute you're in full service and the life force is shining through you. Next thing you're being worked again. And then you're being, you know, like organized into another shape and form within the group field. So I found that quite useful as an articulation of the things that are going on for us anyway. As we work with the life principle, we are aware of these things, but to bring our consciousness to them, and in a way to realize that we have to come up with a whole different set of expectations for ourselves and each other, working with the life principle, than we do with either matter or consciousness. That all of the default understandings about the way to be with each other that come from earlier stages of development are not much use when you're in the life principle. So I feel like, you know, the education here is the education about what makes the communities that we're going into that are run by life and the dark light different, and how to save ourselves some of the drama by changing our level of expectations to that. So using rhythm, understanding that there are going to be these cycles that we go through, making a clear distinction in your own life between your personal self and validating your personal self, but not expecting the life principle to validate it. The life principle just shines through a leaf. It doesn't whisper in its ear, you know. So life is not going to care for your personal self. You as a soul have to do that. So making a clear distinction between caring for your instrument in the three worlds, and then letting the transpersonal and the life force energies flow through you, which are part of the synchronicities of the group life and belong out there in the soul of the world as they move through us. Yeah, so I feel like that's probably, there's more in the transmission that covers some of it. And I thought it was interesting that now he's starting to give us training, you know. So before it was like information about it, and now it's training. And the last time DK worked with, you know, groups was back in the 1920s or 30s, and he gave individual, and he said he won't never do that again. He'll just give group. And I think because the Aquarian age is upon us, then the emphasis on our individuality has to come back to us. So each person has to care for their own individual, but the group itself, the dynamic of the group, is what he's talking to. So I feel like as we more and more put up our leaders, then we'll more and more feel the resonance between the transmission that comes through every week and what's actually going on in our own system. Because the transmission is just me giving words to energy that is arriving anyway. And as that energy arrives and we're all picking it up differently, we'll start to, you know, formulate a kind of magic that happens in the group life. And then the things that happen in the group field and between us will start to be understood in terms of this life principle shining through us. Okay, so that's the download for this evening. And yeah, I'm interested because this is not just a theoretical process, right? Like we're all deeply in this or connect to this some way. So I'm interested in how it lands with you and yeah, how you're feeling about it.
I'm loving how these transmissions now, it's not just a training, but it's almost in real time an explanation of what's happening in the field.
Yeah.
And it's such a like, whoa, like, you know, it's almost like he's been reading my personal diary.
I'm sure. Maybe we all should.
But I have a question that wasn't answered. So as the organization and the rhythmical cycles happen, will the who, what, and where change within the group of what, like where you're being drawn to because of where you're needed, or like where the energy goes?
Yeah, I'm sure, because I think if you're going with the life principle, you're basically going with leverage. You're saying, use me the best way that I can be used, and I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And for me personally, the hardest times have been when I have been used and doing something amazing and it feels great and so on, then all of a sudden I'm being pulled away, and I don't know why, and I resist because I'm doing such good work. But that is one of the hardest, is because you're just back in the mystery. So I do think that as long as the next place you're pulled to, you then see, oh, now it makes sense because I'm being used even more rather than, less. As long as that's happening, then I think, we need to expect that if the world soul needs to operate through millions of people and put them through soul initiatory processes, that as soon as we're more valuable somewhere else, we'll be called. And actually, there's a deep intimacy in that. It's a bit like, it's the modern version of the missionaries and so on, that would all go together and then they'd all go off to the Amazon or wherever they went. Hopefully a much more enlightened version of that. But there's that sense of recognizing that the bond between us is not based on our interpersonal social relationships, that the love has a deeper quality, which is that we're all in love with life and we all make life our priority. And each of us who has that inside them often can feel in a way like a leper, that they don't really fit in with other people's expectations of relationship, because they know that life calls them, they will respond. But it's a deep intimacy to know and share that with other people, and to give each other permission. I know what's happening, life's calling me, and to be able to say to each other, I love you and life's calling, and to fully accept and bless and support that. Yeah, Shane.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hello, everybody, and hey, Bruce. The accuracy of your transmissions are quite incredible. We live in a community here in Ibiza, and literally, I find every single week you transmit something. It's like literally what is emerging through our beings and the processes we're going through, just with intuition. And, today was really, wow, really on point. And I just want to say thank you so much for consistently, giving so much. And it really is, it helps so much, especially with the conflict side of things, and just to give people surety about why certain things are happening with physics. And it's just basically working through any imbalances. It's really just aligning people up. And the accuracy is profound. So I just want to say thank you very much.
Thanks, Shane. And something I want to say about that is that, of course, because life principle is impersonal, if somebody's in it, then they're going to be articulating or dancing or singing, or they're going to be articulating something that we all recognize. That's how you know it's the life principle. Otherwise, it's just, their unique note, which can be lovely. But if it's the life principle, something in it should say, yes, that's happening inside me. Those are just words explaining or giving language to something I'm experiencing, which means that all of us then have a responsibility when we're working with the life principle to begin to clothe that life principle in whatever our note is. Like mine is alignment through to words. Yours could be dance, yours could be building, yours, whatever the life is calling you to do, then starting to offer that life. And it will be, it's the glimpses of life coming through another human being that tell us how to use the applied power of synchronicity. It's the glimpses of life that then life calls to life, and I go, that life that's coming through you, I recognize I need. So people come towards me because they want to get some understanding and comprehension about the energy that's activating in them. People come to somebody else because their body is transmitting that energy and they need to resource it directly. So as a group, you know, that's Aquarian, not Piscean. We have to stop valuing some people's expression of the life principle over others and making that the thing. We have to recognize that that life comes in all of the ray shapes and forms, and we have to take responsibility for the way it's coming through us and share it with each other. So that's the invitation, I think, you know, of this group life, is that now we're not just passive, we're active, and we always were active, but now the pressure's been put upon us to you know, share that activity.
Yeah, maybe I'd like to speak into that piece, because that came up like really strongly for me this morning in meditation, and as I've shared with you, Bruce, and others here, like I had this resistance to wanting to talk about what I connect to in meditation or trying to articulate it afterwards. And this morning as I was meditating, I realized that I'm sitting in my consciousness too much, trying to listen with my consciousness alone, but as I aligned all of my chakras and sat in and allowed the current to flow through me, and then and then made myself right afterwards, but not staying in that alignment. I wasn't in my consciousness, but words flowed through me in a way I'd never experienced before. So it's quite powerful. Beautiful.
So you weren't trying to filter them through your mind.
Yeah, but obviously you have to use my mind to type, but I didn't actually. My experience was I was typing, but it wasn't coming from my consciousness.
Yeah, great. I think that another point that he made in the transmission is that what occult work is, which is first ray, which is life principle work, is that it works with energy, not consciousness and form. Okay, and we're so designed to work with consciousness and form that it works directly with subtle energy. And so allowing the energy to flow in both directions, in all directions, is more important than understanding it. That's why he also said that when you're receiving transmission, like you were just sharing, don't let the transmission, which is idea essence, it's at the core of consciousness, not consciousness. If you let it go into consciousness prematurely, you're going to get interested about the ideas, right? And you're going to start to think, and you're going to start to have reference. Oh, I know something about that. And your librarian comes in with 4 volumes, and you know, and so now you've lost the thread of life, and you're in consciousness. I do that all the time because I work in consciousness, and so refining myself to place a higher value in the stream of energy coming in than the excitement it's producing in my consciousness or in my body. So some people, it goes directly to their sacral center, Winter. And some people it goes directly to their heart and so on. And then we're so used to expanding the energy in the way that we know that we forget to stay with the source of the energy. And if we can stay with the source of the energy, then later on, when the energy transmission stops, then get your mind interested and unpack it and explain it and think about it, but not during. Yeah. Okay, anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah. Hello?
Oh,
Hi, Ozzy.
Yeah. Is it okay? Shall I go? All right. What I'm feeling is, it's like I feel like I'm actually allowing myself the gift of gifting myself the personal right now. And I feel after like over a decade of doing the spiritual and transpersonal, and I'm not this and I'm not that I actually have denied myself some incredible, touching, really personal, like that touch my heart and my soul experiences, because I want to be in the group, or I want to, and I can see where that I've bypassed a lot of really important milestones I feel in my soul evolution, or just my evolution of being a human. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, the group and organize, like, but I my personal right now feels like there's a whisper to her, there's a song, there's something that's saying my feelings and these connections, or the depth of how deep I can go into that feels as touching as the heights of my spiritual journey, like going in there is touching me in new ways. And I feel like that's right now like this incredible fertile mud of another type of evolution I need to go on. And I just wanted to give voice to that. Like, I feel like I can't bypass this personal at all. And anytime I go anywhere where I feel it's part of the spiritual or awareness or going into consciousness, everything inside is no, like stay with this heart, this personal soul. So that's where I'm at. And I just wanted to give that a voice, and how rich and incredible it's been to actually give myself that, to not run through the back door, but to stay there and feel all these parts that are coming back to me, just being in my personal and seeing actually who I am in the personal and not being anything else but that at the moment. Like not my godlike self or consciousness or even belonging to anything other than what's right deep in the core of me. And I just, wanted to voice that and how profound that is.
You don't need to convince anyone about that. You know, like part of the...
I don't know if I'm convinced. I guess I'm sharing it.
I hear that story a lot. You know, spiritual bypass, personal bypass, blah, blah, blah. But it sounds like you're putting a lot of meaning. You know, you're making effort to give meaning to that, you know, to self-validate the choices that you're making. And I'd invite you to be with the life principle, which says and gives permission. Look, I'm following the life. You know, like you don't have to have a reason for following the life into your personal or to whatever you follow. You just follow the life, and you know that you're in a community of people that support you to do that. And then we'll all see when someone actually is following the life or whether they're bypassing, because it'll become apparent, you know, as we go down the track, because nobody's letting anyone go in this process. So yeah, I feel like it's great that you're giving yourself permission to just move where life is calling you.
Hi, I wanted to share. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This was super, super useful. Today's transmission, or your talk, and also Rich, the sharing you just made also. Last week, I felt like it was so powerful, and there were like, it was getting instruction, and we're starting to get instructions on how to do this. And I felt this, like, I don't channel things, like words don't come. I can't then start writing or typing. It's not that way in me. And I just felt this despair, like these instructions are given for beings that are designed in a different way, or connect in a different way. And what I'm getting from this transmission, which is like, is that it's okay. Like I can receive in the way that my seventh ray soul and third ray monad way can, and through knowing and through body and through expression. And even if that just comes out as one word or a phrase, like it doesn't have to be, well, I don't even have to go there. Like it just can be still just a sound or like an expression through body, and make sense of it later. That's what I'm taking from it. Tell me if I'm off on that, but at least it's a relief. Maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better.
Well, that's a very human trait, but you look reasonably alive to me, and you know that's the measuring stick, is like, am I becoming more alive? Like, is life moving through me? And for some, that may be the experience of life shining through the jewel and lighting up their consciousness. For others, it can be their heart or their body, but it's unmistakable because it is, you know, that ecstatic energy of knowing you are in the right place, doing the right thing, and that vibration is moving through you, and you are being used for a purpose greater than you can comprehend. And so I don't see any of those, you know, contraindicators for you. So I feel like it's beautiful to acknowledge, particularly of the kind of energy that moves through you. And this is part of the masculine feminine thing. If it moves through your body more than your heart and your consciousness, sometimes you need extra self-validation about that because the culture doesn't support it. But it's always good too in an ashram, in a group field, to, yes, identify who you are, your third ray monad, seventh ray soul, but also know that at a deeper level you are the whole friggin' shebang, and therefore you are also the first ray soul and the seventh. And so sound your note, but realize you're the whole orchestra, and learn from the other beings that naturally sound those notes in different ways. And then pretty soon, you know, your capacity expands.
And one last thing I want to say, because I disagree. I mean, I know you have your different experiences, but that it will take us a couple hundred years to get into this flow of like, okay, what is this between us? Is this soul? Is this, you know, what needs to play out, and not making it personal, or not like robbing the group of that? I don't know. I feel like we're close. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about saying it's going to take a couple of hundred years is that it immediately puts the personality to sleep, you know, because we're not going to be around for that. But I think that perspective is more that, you know, we're at the beginning of a 2,000-year age, and, you know, the cuspal time is several hundred years before Pisces truly gives way to Aquarius. So from that perspective, we're all in experimentations of Aquarian relating, and a lot, in my experience, inside myself. Like, I remember standing on Glastonbury tour yelling at the universe saying, please give me a heart transplant, because the Piscean quality of my heart is just so strong, you know. And most of our relating is still very deeply colored by the last 2,000 years. So I feel like we're learning, and maybe we'll get it better and better and faster. And I love the fact that we're templing, and Highden is getting it more and more. So yeah, we're on a journey, but I still think we're at the beginning. Love you. Okay, well, I think we'll complete there. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge the ashramic intimacy that's starting to form, which is a different kind of intimacy. In some ways, it's more lonely. And I think that we often replace the sense of aloneness with emphasizing emotional intimacy and erotic intimacy and personality, you know, relating, in order to avoid that that sense of really deep aloneness that comes from a soul being worked into the mystery. But when we are with others who also have said yes to that, and we understand the unique aloneness that comes from being dedicated to something deeper than most of the social interactions that are happening out there in the world, that creates a deep sense of trust and a deep sense of intimacy with each other. So part of the power of coming into a group formation and doing practice together and sharing together is that level of intimacy increases. So I'm feeling it, and I hope you are. And yeah, the encouragement too is that if you are on this train, to keep doing enough work to stay on the train, you know, which means doing at least your weekly practice of the altar work and the transmission work. And, you know, you want to accelerate it, then do it daily or speed up the process. But there is a ticket price to this experiment, and that ticket price is showing up for the energy and allowing it to work through you consciously and with your consent. Otherwise, it will start to work through in ways that feel disruptive and will kick you out. Much love. See you next week.